So we're taking a look, and it looks like it's about 3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital plan.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no,
the
but
Martin building.
it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's
So
not new.
I guess the news there is that Donald Trump got Jerome Powell to wear a hard hat, but the real scoop is that Jerome Powell in real time failed to be humiliated by Donald Trump by putting on his glasses, reading the document Donald Trump pulled out of his pocket, and making a fool out of Donald Trump for getting his facts wrong about the cost of multiple buildings being renovated. Vaughn Hilliard, that seemed like a colossal failure. Where are they going next?
I mean, though, may I say, Nicole, the number of people that we have on camera with the current sitting president here in 2025 repudiating and pushing back against his commentary, it's a very small number. Volodymyr Zelensky, Mark Carney, and I think Jerome Powell. I'd have to spend a little bit more time coming up with a longer list if there is one. Jerome Powell, it was a question of whether the Fed chair was going to be here for this moment with the president coming over to take a look at the Federal Reserve headquarters, which is undergoing this major renovation. We should be clear. It's not with taxpayer money. It's with Fed Reserve resources to go through this renovation here. The president cannot fire the Fed chairman, but people within his White House are essentially laying the foundation to claim that there was fraud by Jerome Powell in this renovation, that they are over budget, and that is where you saw the dispute between the $2.5 billion construction costs versus now the $3.1 billion, and you see Jerome Powell saying, well, that was including a third building that we already finished 5 years ago, so that shouldn't be included. I asked Russ Vought last week, the OMB director, who has been on the front lines of arguing this supposed fraud, if he had any specific allegations to point to, and he said, well, that's what they're looking into. So it's another moment where this administration is alleging fraud or wrongdoing before actually having that evidence and looking after. That's quite a remarkable moment of television, I think, that we just saw.
I mean, such a debacle for Trump. He should have stuck with nanny, 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 I don't like you. I mean, that was ridiculous. I got flap sweat for the president. Glenn, this is the story he doesn't want us to talk about. This is a deposition, a taped deposition with Jeffrey Epstein. It is, let me actually provide some context. It's from back in 2010. The series of questions were about associations, precisely what is sort of at the beating heart, at the intersection of the conspiracy theory and sort of the fact pattern. The piece that MAGA wants most is all the powerful people who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein. So this was a line of questioning about David Copperfield, about Alan Dershowitz and others. And this happened. Let me play this for you.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
There's something eerie, I guess, about the voice from the grave, but that was Jeffrey Epstein in his own words when asked about being with Donald Trump in the presence of girls under 18.
I mean, we had some reporting. A reporter at our paper, a couple of reporters at our paper, wrote a story earlier this week talking about Trump being in the presence of Epstein with a young woman. I think that Epstein said something along the lines of "this one's for me" or something. in the story. I don't recall it exactly.
Ms. Farmer, yeah, he says, quote, "This one's not for you." Yeah.
Right. So I think, look, the one thing we should keep pointing to is there have been a lot of investigations that have gone on to this prior to the ones that the Trump administration itself is conducting, and they have not found sufficient evidence, or from our reporting over the years as a paper, anything that's really a predicate for a serious investigation into Trump's involvement in this sort of thing. But again, it gets back to this issue of how his base can reconcile their passion to find out about what happened, and also the energy that this emanates from. Trump's entire political movement is predicated on belief there's a rich and powerful cabal of people who are not accountable to regular folks, who are scheming in the background, and that he's not part of that, and he's going to tear that down. This cuts against it. The question is, will there be, and we haven't necessarily seen it in the polling, but will there be a moment, particularly as we move towards the midterms and towards a period of time where Donald Trump really does become a lame duck president, when they decide to split off and take care of themselves and try to turn Trumpism into something different, bigger than him, that can survive him, and more importantly for them, that can keep them making money and keep them getting elected.
Breaking moments ago, new reporting from the Wall Street Journal sheds more light on that book Ghislaine Maxwell compiled for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday in 2003. The book that contained a letter bearing Trump's signature and had the outline of a naked woman. The Journal now has details of other letters in that book, including former President Bill Clinton, Wall Street billionaire Leon Black, fashion designer Vera Wang, and media owner Mort Zuckerman. That's according to documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. More from the Journal's reporting. The professionally bound birthday book had multiple volumes and included a table of contents that listed the contributions organized into groups. While many writers weren't famous, some categories had notable people. Clinton and Trump were listed under the Friends group, along with about 20 other associates, such as Black, Zuckerman, former Victoria's Secret leader Leslie Wexner, attorney Alan Dershowitz, and the late Jean-Luc Brunel, who ran a modeling agency. Now, we should note, NBC News has not seen or verified these materials. A spokesman for Clinton declined to comment on the birthday message, which was reviewed by the Journal. He referred the Journal to a previous statement that the former president had cut off ties more than a decade before Epstein was arrested in 2019, didn't know about Epstein's alleged crimes. Black, Zuckerman, and Wang all declined to comment to the Journal. Back with us, Christy Greenberg and Tim O'Brien.
As this was breaking, people that I know were in my text message inbox saying, well, are Democrats going to continue to be on this beat now since apparently Bill Clinton was in the files? And I think now is a good opportunity to play what Congressman Robert Garcia, who is the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, had to say.
People have said, well, who's in the files? Who could be mentioned? We don't care. We don't care how powerful a person is, how much influence a person had, who they knew, if they were in politics, if they were in business. If you harmed and abused children, minors, young women, then you need to be held accountable for your crimes, and the Oversight Committee is ready to do just that.
That was earlier today, Tim, in Long Beach, well before this reporting came out. Your thoughts?
I think, I don't think the Democrats are interested in anyone else in this except for Donald Trump.
That's a mistake.
No, I think they're happy to say that we're comfortable talking about Bill Clinton being in these files because his name has been spread through all of this from the beginning. I don't think the goal of this on the Democratic side of the ledger is necessarily coming from a place to see justice. And I'm not saying that they're wrong for pursuing it that way. I think this is a highly politicized investigation, and they're looking for a political outcome first and foremost. I also hope further justice gets done if they uncover any more information about sexual predators, particularly sexual predators targeting young girls. I think this Wall Street Journal story doesn't do anything more than put extra and important detail on what we already know, that Jeffrey Epstein networked with a powerful group of people, mainly men, that it's possible that that group of men tried to engineer a cover-up to either protect Jeffrey Epstein or keep their own names out of the press. They ultimately failed to do that. I think the other thing this establishes, and it's important in this libel lawsuit that Trump has filed against the Journal, Trump has repeatedly said, I didn't write the letter. Well, the Wall Street Journal has never said he wrote the letter. They said that he contributed a letter to a book that bore his signature. And Donald Trump rarely writes any of his own things anyway. He doesn't write his own email. He doesn't write his own books. So this argument that they have libeled him because they knowingly published a letter that was a fabrication, which is the line Trump is going on, keeps getting undermined by the fact that he had his own emissaries delivering this letter to Ghislaine Maxwell, and that she was close to Epstein, and that it got published alongside all of these other people. Again, this still comports with what we already know, but it keeps this fire alive around the idea of a cover-up.
Anything legal in there? Anything that points you in a certain direction?
Well, just looking at whether or not the letter came from him, whether or not he wrote it, but whether he contributed it, I would say that the details in this article seem to lend credence to the fact that he did. Yes. Because I initially looked at it and I was like, birthday letter. He's writing a birthday letter. He doesn't get Melania birthday gifts. Like, that's reported every year. Like, what is he doing here? But if you look at this is an elite circle of people, right? You've got Bill Clinton. You've got Wall Street billionaire Leon Black. Like, you've got a number of real players here. And Donald Trump is all about being in that elite circle. And it shows that others, at least Leon Black in this article, are also contributing kind of dirty poetry, like a dirty poetry society. Maybe that was a guideline that Ghislaine Maxwell gave them for what they were looking for this book for him. So all of that tends to suggest to me that, yes, this letter was contributed from him. I agree. Did he write it? Probably not. I think a lot will depend on. I want to see the signature. I mean, it's a very distinctive signature.
Just going back to what you said, obviously it's politically driven, but the Democrats, from a messaging point of view, have to be exactly where Garcia is. This is across the board. This is horrific, and this is not there. This is bipartisan.
We don't care who's in there.
We're going to go after him.
Yes.
Because otherwise you have no credibility doing what you're doing.
I think you've got Democrats actually pretty unified in their messaging. And I thought one of the most interesting pieces of reporting that came out today, Simone, is about the way that the White House is now handling this, which is to say only top officials are allowed to comment on it. They're going through a vetting process. They want everyone else to remain quiet. On some level, that is them operating like a normal White House, where not everyone and their mother is allowed to sound off on the news of the day.
Correct. It's like, oh, my goodness, a comm strategy with adults actually just entered the room. Caroline Leavitt is no longer in charge. However, look, there have been many White Houses throughout history that have tried to manage a crisis. And it hasn't worked out well. It didn't work out well for the Clinton White House. It didn't work out well for Nixon. It doesn't ever work out well. It didn't work out well for Joe Biden. Okay, when a special counsel was appointed and there was news that there were these files, classified documents in one of his offices. It just never works out well for folks. So I think that the Trump administration is trying to put the genie back in the bottle. But the reality is that it's out. And Democrats, what I heard from Greg Meeks, what I heard from Robert Garcia the other day when we sat down with him at the table, it was that we didn't start this. We didn't want this. This isn't our issue. But since they put it on the table, here we are.
And that's true. That's completely true. The Democrats didn't start this. This started from within Trump's own White House. They set this in motion 3 weeks ago by popping the balloon that every MAGA conspirator had, which was Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. It was a cover-up. He didn't kill himself, and that the documents all amounted to a cover-up. And Trump's own White House said there's no secret list. And we believe he killed himself. And that is when the fire started.
That is when the fire started, and baby is still burning.
Convicted child sex abuser Ghislaine Maxwell is not the victim here. The real victims, the survivors, are people like Jane. Now, we don't know Jane's full name, but we know that Jane was 14 years old when she met Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at a youth camp in Michigan. Here's what the story said, quote, Epstein first abused Jane when she was 14. Jane said that there were sexual encounters with Epstein for the next 3 years, around every 2 weeks. Sometimes Maxwell was in the room during this sexual abuse. There were occasions when Maxwell touched Jane's breasts. Jane is a real survivor. So is Carolyn, who testified that she went to Epstein's home over 100 times from age 14 to 18, where she was told to massage Jeffrey Epstein. Carolyn said that at the age of 14, before one of the massages, Maxwell came in and felt my boobs and my hips and my buttocks and said that I had a great body for Mr. Epstein and his friends. And then there's Maria Farmer. Unlike some of Epstein's other victims, Maria Farmer was 25 years old when she says Epstein assaulted her, though her younger sister, who also says she was abused by Epstein, was a minor. Maria Farmer was an employee of Jeffrey Epstein's at the time. She said that in 1996, she was at the estate of Victoria's Secret CEO Leslie Wexner with Epstein and Maxwell. She says that Epstein and Maxwell violently groped her until she fled the room and barricaded herself in another part of the building. And during her time in Epstein's orbit, Maria Farmer says she also encountered Donald Trump. She told the New York Times that in 1995, quote, late one night, Mr. Epstein unexpectedly called her to his offices in a luxury building in Manhattan. She arrived in running shorts. Mr. Trump then arrived wearing a business suit and started to hover over her. Ms. Farmer said she recalled feeling scared as Mr. Trump stared at her bare legs. Then Mr. Epstein entered the room, and she recalled him saying to Mr. Trump, no, she's not here for you. The two men left the room, and Ms. Farmer said she could hear Mr. Trump commenting that he thought Ms. Farmer was 16 years old. Joining me now is Maria Farmer, along with her attorney, Jennifer Freeman. And before we get started, I just want to say to you, Maria, I think it is incredibly courageous that you are continuing to tell your story in a very, very public way. It cannot be easy, and I'm very grateful for you being here with us tonight. So let me start just there, Maria.
Thank you, Jen, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let me start by asking you, I mean, this nightmare has followed you for a very, very long time, I mean, decades. And I'm sure that Jeffrey Epstein's reemergence, I mean, all over the news has been incredibly painful. How are you? How are you doing? Yes. How are you digesting all of this?
Thank you for asking that. That's very thoughtful, because a lot of people aren't aware of every time his picture is on one of their podcasts or, and I've asked several people, can you please not just flash his picture everywhere, or Maxwell's, and not glamorize them? But thank you for asking that, because a lot of people aren't aware that re-traumatizes victims every time we have to see his face. And it's a case that has just never gone away. It just won't go away. And I need your audience to understand that, I reported this almost 3 decades ago. So a lot of people will say, oh, why is she just coming forward now? And they think it's political. And it's not. It's something I've been working on. Pretty much I dedicated all of my youth to this. And so I'm doing it not just for me, but for the victims who are now deceased and the victims that are very much alive. And I want to get justice for all of them. I feel that for my little sister to have gone through what she went through and to have had to testify against Maxwell and then have to suffer, and there are others that I love very much who are suffering this right now about Maxwell, it's completely unacceptable. Why would Maxwell be given a voice when she is a convicted pedophile? It's been very difficult, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate you asking.
Of course, and I think we're all grateful for you having the courage to be here and tell your story and be out there. And let me ask you, because this is one of the reasons I think it's so important to hear from people like you who are so courageous. I mean, you and your sister, as you just referenced, Annie, were the first survivors to come forward and try to tell the authorities about what Epstein and his associates were doing. You first went to the NYPD in 1996, then the FBI. You said you felt like you weren't taken seriously. Right. You've repeated that.
I was dismissed.
You were now suing the federal government, accusing it of negligence and failing to protect victims of sexual assault. And I just wanted our viewers to be aware of all of that and all the time you've spent on this and trying to get this story told. Tell us more about the story you told to the police.
Well, when I called, I told them I was reporting kind of an international pedophile, and I called it child pornography ring because they didn't call it CSAM yet. But that part is one of the most important parts to me, because some photographs that were personal photographs of mine that I used for working from, not to copy exactly, but they were anatomy studies for my art. And I was doing these series of paintings for the movie As Good as It Gets. This wasn't for me. It wasn't for Epstein. It was actually for a major producer. And because of being, held with held captive. I didn't get to finish that. But basically, those photographs are a permanent thing that Ghislaine Maxwell stole from the basement at Leslie Wexner's guest house. And those photographs are a permanent way that my sisters are being abused and that I'm being abused. And so when I told the federal government, I said, this really frightens me because I believe if they did this to us, they're doing it to everyone. And I see a lot of children coming in, allegedly for Victoria's Secret modeling or for modeling for Katie Ford. You know, they had all these model scouts around them, Trump, all these people, and they were allegedly auditioning models. But for Victoria's Secret, the girls didn't have any breasts. I didn't understand. And so basically, it's been very an arduous journey over 29 years of just trying to get people to hear me. So I'm so grateful that you're bringing attention to this evening.
No, and we want you to be able to tell all the aspects of your story that it's so important for people to understand. And it wasn't the only, you didn't only go to the FBI and the police back in the 90s. You also had an interview with agents in 2006. And one of our legal correspondents, Lisa Rubin, was able to obtain the FBI's notes from that interview. I'm going to showing some of them right there on the screen. There are a ton of redactions in these notes, as you can see. And I know this was some time ago, but do you remember what you spoke to them about during this interview and what details you shared with them during this interview?
Yes. Yeah, so basically, I want to make it really clear because people don't understand this. My little sister was only 16, and she didn't go to the FBI in '96. I did that. And I protected my family because I didn't want anyone to know how dangerous this was. And so basically, after 1996, they literally just hung up and I heard nothing for 10 years. And then I got a knock on the door. I was in the woods of North Carolina, and there were these two agents standing there. And Agent Nesbitt Kirkendall said, we're here about your 1996 FBI report. And I was kind of shocked, and it's because I have so much trauma. I was kind of making jokes and trying to give them orange juice and cookies and, you know, just make light of it. And it's so traumatic. Like, my sister was selling like products to them. You know, we didn't know what to do with the FBI. We told them the entire story of what occurred with Ghislaine Maxwell being a sexual predator and predating children. She used to say, I need to go get the nubiles at 3 o'clock because the children were getting out of school. And of course, I would ask to quit. And I said, what is this? And she said, no. They're just models for Victoria's Secret, Maria. Just calm down, you know? So basically, there was a lot of gaslighting that occurred. But in 2006, they hunted me down. And they asked me to testify in the federal trial in Florida. And then they gave the sweetheart deal. And so I never testified. And then when it came time to testify in this trial, I actually was in ICU and chemotherapy. And a lot of people say, she didn't even get to testify. And I'm like, because I was incapacitated. But my sister did testify, and my mother. And our stories have never changed. They're very credible.
I did not realize that.
I just want my files.
Of course you do. And I didn't realize about your health journey, too. You've been through a tremendous amount. You've also talked about a night in 1995 when you were at Jeffrey Epstein's office and Donald Trump came by and made a lewd comment, and then you overheard Epstein say to him, she's not for you. And we just told this story because you've told it publicly before.
Right.
And in response to that, and I want to ask you about that, but I just wanted to note that in response to that, a White House spokesperson responded saying, this is recycled old fake news of the highest order that was already peddled more than 6 years, concocted by Democrats and the liberal media, just like they did with the Russiagate scandal, which was just proven today. The president was never in his office. The fact is that the president kicked him out of his club for being a creep. There is a lot packed in there, similar themes we've seen in other statements, I will say, but it's about you. What is your response to that?
Right. So, first of all, that's so insulting and disingenuous because I reported this in 1996. And I have to say, like, Donald Trump was a Democrat when I reported him. So him saying that this was a Republican thing, this is not a partisan thing. This is pedophilia. Anyone can be a pedophile. It's literally, unfortunately, it just happens to be a lot of Republicans, and that's a fact. And those same Republicans want to entertain Ghislaine Maxwell, like Tim Burchett wants to entertain her and flash her around and act like we victims should not be heard from. He didn't want to speak to me. He wanted to speak to Ghislaine and give her a voice and an audience. And my little sister is one of her victims, and so am I. So this is so damaging. And yes, I'm fighting 2 cancers, so I would like to be able to retire and have my FBI reports so that I can help bring accountability to everyone. It's not just me. I have the weight of all the young women on my shoulders right now.
You certainly do, and I am, again, grateful for you being here. We have to sneak in a very quick break.
Jen.
I have more questions for you.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind sticking around.
Okay.
Both you and Jennifer,
Not
thank
at
you so
all.
much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
And Trump's former defense attorney spent the day in a Florida prison talking to convicted Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. It's a pivot point in the Trump presidency. As Politico puts it today, the Epstein bombshell explodes, adding the crisis is here. Today, the number 2 at the DOJ, Todd Blanche, is meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell in a federal courthouse in Tallahassee, Florida. But the meeting may be planting the seeds for more backlash. Maxwell's attorney spoke to the press afterwards.
We had a very productive day today with the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell. He took a full day and asked a lot of questions, and Ms. Maxwell answered every single question. She never stopped, she never invoked a privilege, she never declined to answer. She answered all the questions truthfully, honestly, and to the best of her ability.
And Maxwell's own brother is now saying she's preparing new evidence. But Epstein victims warn Maxwell, a convicted perjurer as well as a child sex trafficker, can't be trusted. Amid the clamor for more transparency, newly surfaced deposition video from 2010 shows an attorney for an Epstein victim asking Epstein about Trump.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
What you saw there, it is all new context around the Wall Street Journal's bombshell reporting that Attorney General Pam Bondi told Trump in May his name was in the Epstein files, among many others, which is prompting new questions about who knew what and when. Former federal prosecutor Ankush Kaduri saying, quote, right now, everyone should be asking whether the highest levels of the federal government, including but not limited to the president, the vice president, the AG, the FBI director, and possibly even some Republican leaders in Congress, depending on what they knew and when, have been misleading the American public for weeks, if not months. Amid all this, GOP Speaker Mike Johnson today undermining Trump's claims that the Epstein uproar is all just some sort of hoax. Listen to Trump and then Johnson contradicting him.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work.
We want full transparency. We want everybody who was involved in any way with the Epstein evils, let's call it what it was, to be brought to justice as quickly as possible. And look, I think the president
This is
does
not a
as well.
hoax, in other words.
Oh, it's not a hoax. Of course not.
Joyce, thank you for being here. I'll start with you. How strange is it for the number 2 at the DOJ to go to Florida and conduct an interview like this one?
I'm not sure strange even begins to capture this. It's completely unprecedented. You know, this is work for prosecutors who are handling cases. They know all of the evidence. They're capable of evaluating the witnesses, but oops, there's no way to have the lead prosecutor on this case conduct an interview because they've just fired Maureen Comey, the AUSA in the Southern District of New York who prosecuted this case. And beyond that, there is no case, Antonia. The Justice Department came out on July 6th with a statement saying there was no one left to be prosecuted. So there is a real question about what Todd Blanche is doing down in Florida. It doesn't look like the Justice Department's work. It looks like the president's work. And that casts a real political tinge over all of this.
Norm, do you see this as kind of ethically murky for a few reasons? I mean, as she just spelled out there, Todd Blanche having served in a personal capacity for the president. And then I was reminded today that Blanche actually at one point went on David Marcus, that's Maxwell's attorney's podcast. They know each other in a sort of social or at least casual way. So do you see something ethically murky here?
Blanche going to meet with Miss Maxwell today with her defense lawyer, Blanche being Donald Trump's defense lawyer, and then Maxwell, who has been convicted of these heinous crimes, and the same Department of Justice that Todd Blanche purports to represent, criticizing her as a liar. It looks like a cover-up of what Donald Trump may or may not have done. And when you put that together with the fact that Trump is in the Epstein files, they haven't produced that material, you have to wonder, can we rely upon whatever comes out of this unsavory meeting today? In prior administrations, for far less of a conflict, Antonia, they would bring in an independent counsel or a special counsel. So there's no whiff of this. But in those cases, you didn't have the president's former defense lawyer as the number 2 at the Department of Justice. So the whole thing reeks to high heaven. I think part of the reason that it is so gripping Washington, gripping the American people, Donald Trump's poll numbers are plummeting. Now, 37% in the latest poll today, is because it speaks to a larger sense of corruption. Donald Trump is in the White House making tens of millions of dollars for himself off of that office. Donald Trump is breaking the law. About 200 courts have said you're breaking the law in your official acts. He's targeting these innocent migrants. These are not criminals. These are honest working people who've come to our country to do jobs. So there's a larger sense of corruption. It's perfectly captured by Donald Trump here having buddied up with the rich and powerful who victimized Jeffrey Epstein, victimized the most vulnerable. That's a slogan for the Trump administration, benefiting the rich and powerful, Trump's cronies, victimizing the most vulnerable in our country. That's why it has such traction.
And that's why we're starting to see Democrats, too, seize on this and get a little bit more comfortable in this space, because they're starting. I've had conversations with them in recent days where they're starting to connect the Epstein case to the fighting oligarchy tour that we've seen Sanders and so many others join him on in recent days, because they're picking up on the fact that the American public seems to already have actually drawn all those connections. It might be D.C. that was last to see how this whole framework works.
Exactly. So all too often, our political leaders follow the heart and mind of the public. Perhaps it should be the other way, but these declining poll numbers really indicate the American people are sick of the corruption. And the Epstein scandal is just the latest example of the corruption. We see the pictures. We see the video. Donald Trump is clearly close to this heinous individual. And then we know there's documents. Why not release the documents at the Democracy Defenders Fund, where I'm now the chair? We've filed FOIA requests, and we're prepared to litigate those FOIA requests. We're not going to rest until we get these Trump-Epstein files.
Joyce, I want your take on what we would even get from Ghislaine Maxwell. Obviously, today, when her attorney spoke, they didn't give us much detail other than to say, you know, she answered every single question, that kind of thing. But as I laid out at the top of the show, she has a reputation. I mean, prosecutors laid it out as part of their story, their case against her, that she is a liar, a downplayer, a fabricator. So what are we to do with what we ultimately find out she has told Todd Blanche and the DOJ?
So it's important to think about the fact that this is Ghislaine Maxwell talking to the Justice Department. And the Justice Department's job is to prosecute cases. It's not to be some purveyor of truth to the American people. That's more in Congress's wheelhouse. So what we're asking here really is, what can this person as a witness contribute to a future prosecution? Now, look, we don't know why the government originally passed on signing her up as a witness, but I can make an educated guess, having spent 25 years at DOJ. She's a witness I would have liked to have had against Jeffrey Epstein, and I would have given her a deal, maybe not a great one, but some kind of a deal in exchange for that testimony, because the person you really want to prosecute is the person at the top, the most responsible person. So DOJ would have tried to sign her up, and they apparently concluded either that she didn't have valuable testimony, which seems extremely unlikely here, or that she was not a reliable witness, that she wouldn't tell the truth, that she failed to disclose all the crimes that she and others participated in. There was a reason here, even if we don't know it. So that casts a real question as to why they're talking to her. There is really no way to guarantee her truthfulness in this setting. And as Norm says, it has the appearance of people trying to get their story straight. It looks more like a joint defense agreement in the works than it looks like prosecutors trying to figure out what a witness has to say, because there's simply no case here to prosecute. It's so
the other
improper
thing, too, that I
it's
wonder,
very difficult to express it.
The other piece of this, and correct me, both of you, if I'm wrong here, is it feels like this is also moving very quickly. This is a very complicated case involving a vast network, a lot of money, heinous crimes. Have the victims been given enough time to be consulted as we see all of these steps? The subpoenas moving very quickly, Todd Blanche flying to Florida. Is the pace here at all a concern to you both?
Well, it is a concern to Judge Paul Engelmeyer here in the Southern District of New York, who has that grand jury subpoena matter. And in fact, he told DOJ, slow down. Have you considered the rights of the victims? And he set a schedule for briefing. You have to ask yourself, if they're willing to release the most sensitive material, and I learned a lot that I know about Rule 6E that governs grand jury material from my friend Joyce Vance. If they're willing to release the most sensitive material in government, grand jury material, what about the rest of the files? What about the Trump-Epstein mentions? Why not put it all out there? You have to think, well, maybe there's something negative in there for Donald Trump, but we don't know, because they seem to be cherry picking with the Maxwell meeting with the grand jury materials.
And yesterday, I think in the Supreme Court having to do with immunity, I heard the argument was brilliant. I listened to it last night. I thought it was really great. I thought the judge's questions were great. And all presidents have to have immunity. It has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing. All presidents have to have immunity. If you don't have a president, certainly not a president that the founders wanted. Whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. Obama's been caught directly. So people say, oh, you know, a group. It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper. Look, he's guilty. It's not a question. You know, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think of. They tried to steal the election. They tried to obfuscate the election. They did things that nobody's ever even imagined, even in other countries.
No. But even if those unfounded allegations against Barack Obama had any merit, and they don't, President Trump seems to have forgotten about that Supreme Court ruling on immunity, something he repeatedly called for before that decision. There's so much really to talk about here. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Thursday, July 24th. With us, we have co-host of our fourth hour, contributing writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim Vandehei, New York Times opinion columnist David French, and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale. You know, this is Jonathan Lemire. Of course, we have to talk about the Red Sox remarkable comeback in the game of the year last night. But let's talk about more mundane issues first. We've been saying it every day here. We've been saying it for months now. Marco Rubio, when he was at head of the Intelligence Committee in the United States Senate, run by Republicans, had every Republican sign on to very explicit language, saying that Donald Trump's own campaign caused what was the exact language? A grave counterintelligence threat. And they went on and on talking about how Russia was trying to influence the outcome of the election. I mean, what's crazy about this is, and of course, many people would say, some say it's because what's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal this morning. DOJ told Trump his name is among those in Epstein files. Some would say Tulsi Gabbard. And what was that yesterday? Seriously? Talk about playing down to the lowest of low expectations. Tulsi, congratulations. You just did it. And I think expectations may have been here. And I think you may have gotten, you can't even see it on the TV screen, but if you can see my right hand to be down here, Tulsi Gabbard, you are the winner of actually meeting the lowest of low expectations that were laid out for you. But all of this stuff is just leading to chaos, and maybe the president thinks, hey, let's throw as much against the wall as we can throw against the wall. But as Karl Rove writes, let's see, it's in Wall Street Journal opinion, there is a political price to conspiracy theories. We'll get into Karl's op-ed in a little bit. But they're actually seeing that price, and they're making these wild, outrageous claims. And I don't think it helps the president. I know it sure doesn't help the country in the long run. And as the Wall Street Journal is also saying, and others have said, you know, you actually got a decision from the Supreme Court that grants presidents immunity. So even if your wild, crazy conspiracy theories were right, they would be irrelevant.
Yeah, I heard you hit the bell there, talking about DNI.
We don't do that much. Hold on, she's on the. There we go again. I just hit it again.
That underscores where we are.
That underscores where we are. You know, sometimes when you have baseball parks in the summer, somebody hitting a grand slam, like happened last night, for instance, with the Red Sox. But we'll talk about that later. Maybe fireworks would go up over a stadium, right? But here on Morning Joe, we ring the bell when Tulsi Gabbard meets her low expectations. So we're going to be ringing it a lot this morning. But go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, so she made her debut in the White House briefing room yesterday. And at the very least, we shall say that the timing here is a bit suspicious. That suddenly we're talking about 2016 again. Suddenly we're talking about Russia interference again and these unfounded claims at the same time when the president has been well chronicled here over the last couple of weeks, has been eager to talk about anything other than the Jeffrey Epstein matter. So we'll get into it more later, but there is reporting first from the Wall Street Journal, then later matched by other news outlets. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, did tell President Trump that his name appears in the Epstein files. Not quite clear in what context, not suggesting there's necessarily something criminal there, but his name does appear. And of course, we now know that there's been a real rush to release those files by some. Republicans delaying. The House even went home to avoid trying to deal with that matter. But yesterday, we had the White House really fan out on a lot of different fronts. White House reporters having their inboxes blown up by staffers. We saw a real concerted effort by this West Wing to push this story yesterday. And look, obviously, as we say all the time, if there's new evidence, of course, we're going to review it. But a lot of this here, there doesn't appear to be a there. Tulsi Gabbard going to the briefing room yesterday, talking about declassified emails were released on Friday, some of the House report, stands difference to what we heard from the Senate and now Secretary of State Rubio and his former role on the Intel Committee there, suggesting that there was that that the 2016 Russia interference case was actually an Obama-led hoax, that he and the White House and some senior administration officials sort of perpetuated this and pushed this, and that they feel like this is now a great crime that worthy of more investigation. In fact, Gabbard, even Joe, suggesting that criminal referral for President Obama could be referred to DOJ. So there was a lot in that briefing room yesterday, as we'll sift through.
Yeah, it's just a joke. I mean, this is just a joke. I mean.